Today's session is on posture by core zone, sequencing of motion, and we're going to integrate the downswing path test, because that is the moment of truth for all of us. So we're in posture. If as we teach posture, I'm going to put a video on that it goes into power of Jeff Shaw. And when Jeff and I were, it was about a year ago, at the Right Balance facility in the Seattle area, and he showed us a 2-minute video of Jeff hitting 9-iron, track bands on, and he's talking about the increase in distance. He picked up 20 yards with a 9-iron just by changing posture. And I'll add that to the chapter ebook that'll be with this segment. So when your students talk about posture, you please show them that video and how important it is to get in the correct posture so all the angles are set so you can maximize your power. My first doctorate was in the psychology of learning. I spent 7 years in learning labs from undergraduate through graduate school. And when you're learning a new behavior, it's called backwards chaining in new behavior. And as I got involved in golf, I'm trying to figure out, okay, where do we start the backwards chaining? We have the routine, we have walking into the ball, we have the grip, so where does really the golf swing begin once we get to the setup? And that was a question I had for years. And what backwards chaining is, consider the following. An infant sitting, drinking from a bottle. And over time, that infant begins to grasp the bottle. And then over time, a little further time, a few weeks, they anticipate and grasp the bottle here. And that's a backwards chain. They're learning at each link. Ultimately, they reach over, they can pick up the sippy cup. And as an adult, you don't think much about it, but this is a very complex behavior. Picking up a cup has a handle, but we've learned it backwards. That's an important concept here. If you were in school learning a poem, which most of us had to in my day, we had to learn a series of poems for English class in middle school. If you started that poem in the middle and then went both directions, you have a chain there that if you begin at the beginning and follow a verse at a time, you can learn it backwards. But if you start anywhere in the middle, that chain becomes very, very weak and it's tough to track. So we're going to be talking a lot about chaining and the routine in setup today. And coming full circle, as I began to look, once we understood that we can actually test every level of the setup with a downswing path, then the chain became very apparent. And the first link in that chain, believe it or not, is stance width. So once we have the stance width, then we set the posture. Once we have the posture, then we can look at sequencing of motion. So, but before we begin, let me just review what this downswing chain looks like. Our downswing path. Walk into set up to this ball, and I have my grip. And notice my hips are locked in. So I have my grip when I got set, and I stand tall. My downswing path is open. You see my hips just open. I raise one foot. I have set my kinetic chain. I'm going to take my grip again. My hips are locked in. So no matter what I do, my hips are going to stay square. And that's because of the Right Balance Express. So I grip, then I get my stance, then I get into my posture, and I stand tall and my hips are open. If, on the other hand, I come in, I get my stance, I go into get my setup, and I grip, now when I stand, my hips are going to be squared. So one more time, you want to set the lower core before you set the upper core is the bottom line here. So if I get into my setup, looking at segments of this. So I'm going in, this is your ideal have my grip here. I set my grip after I get my setup, and I stand tall. My hips are square. I had knee flex, my hips have stayed square. If I get, once again, I set my grip and then find my setup, my hips are open. So what does this mean? It means a couple of things. I can test it if you don't have a bar. If you just want to let your arms hang loose in the sockets and you let your arms swing, they're going to track that open path. Okay, I can test it with the arms drop. You'll notice my lead hand, my left hand, simply a reflection of my hips. Okay, so if I'm in good shape here, get in my setup, get my grip, then I stand tall, everything's square. My path is true to that line. I let my arms drop, they're exactly the same. Again, this is after the right balance express. So I showed you the last time, and I have to do this because baseball was my sport. If I get in my setup here and I grip, Manny Ramirez played for the Dodgers, great hitter. He would always twirl the bat once he had his setup. Now I'm good to go. Hips are square, stand tall, and here I am. Okay, very square. So again, no matter what you're doing, you want to build the bottom of the core before the upper. Now I get my grip, get in my setup. I built the upper core before the lower. Stand tall, and my hips are wide open. But both of those shots in baseball, I'm going to pull that ball down the third baseline. In golf, this is going to make me over the top. The other thing it does is, if you choose this view, if you look at my trail hip at address here, okay? My trail hip at address. My trail hip should appear to you to be quite low, okay? Now, get my posture, stand tall, hips are square, and that trail hip is stayed low. If, on the other hand, I go into my setup with my grip, so anything that's going to open my hips, you'll notice my trail hip just rose. See, it just went higher. I haven't done anything, but when I stand tall, my hips are open, wide open. So you have to, when any time in that downswing path where I'm set up, get my grip, my trail hip is low, it will stay low when I stand tall. If, on the other hand, I go in with my grip already set, my trail hip has just come up. I don't know if you can tell, my trail hip is higher, I stand tall, and my hips are wide open. What that means is the path, I'm going to be very steep to the ball. The ball's going either left, I'm going to hang back and block it right, or with perfect timing, I might hit a decent shot. So that trail hip rising, even though I've done the right balance express, is quite significant. All right, so that we're going to use that downswing path to test every aspect of setup from now on.